Hi, this is Keith from moderndaydetox.com. This video is going to be about stress and specifically how we can learn to let go of stress, especially unnecessary stress, unnecessary anxiety and overwhelm and worry. And everything that I'm going to talk about in this video is practical. They're things that anybody can do. A couple of them are mindset shifts. A couple of them are lifestyle practices, and then one supplement recommendation if you consider yourself to be somebody who stresses a lot. I think that the best place to start for learning to let go of stress is to understand the role of stress, the function that it serves in our lives. And to do that, if we go back to when we were cavemen or back in our primal days, stress played a vital role in helping us to stay alive in life-threatening situations. So if you think about being out in the wilderness, some animal might come after us that is looking to kill us, or we might be in some situation where another person from another tribe or something is trying to take our food or trying to hurt us, whatever the case is. We had this stress response as a way to put us into an optimal state to either run or fight, right? The fight or flight state. And in that scenario, when our life was actually at stake, or when we were in a very threatening situation, it's very useful. It diverts all of our energy into being able to run or fight, and takes it away from things like digesting and healing the body and detoxing and all these secondary processes to staying alive. The thing now, though, nowadays, is that when we stress, most of the time it's not a life-threatening situation. Most of the time we're staring at a computer screen and numbers don't add up, or we're late on a deadline, or we're sitting in traffic and we're stressed about the traffic, or we're stressed we're going to be late to get somewhere, or we're stressed that something's not happening the way that we want it to. So all of these things are not life-threatening, but the response that we have to them is the same. We still have this release of adrenaline and cortisol that puts us into this state of fight or flight. The big difference, though, is that back in the day, we would actually fight or run when we had this response. And what that did was, it was a way to expend energy and burn off those chemicals and hormones that our body released to bring back a state of balance. But we don't do that anymore. Most of the time when we stress, we're sitting, and then we get stressed, and we continue to sit, and then we stress about something else, and we get in this chronic state of being stressed out all the time. And this is a big epidemic in our world these days, especially in Western society. Everybody's stressed out to the point that they're getting sick, and they're fatigued and overwhelmed and can't enjoy the rest of their lives. So it's really a big thing. And I made a couple notes here. I think it's also, in learning to let go of stress, it's also a good idea to understand why stress is so detrimental to us. And I kind of touched on it already, but when we get stressed, it shuts down our body's digesting, healing, detoxifying, and it diverts that energy to fighting or running. Over time, this means that we're not, and especially being chronically stressed like a lot of us are, this means we're not digesting the nutrients well from our food, breaking down and digesting nutrients from supplements. We're not regenerating our bodies after we stress and after we have, maybe work out, do certain things like exercise, which is good, but over time we're just not healing. We're stuck in this state of chronic stress, and that's why they say stress is the leading cause of disease, because it literally depletes us. Stress depletes many different things from the body on one hand, but then it also prevents us from getting the things, assuming we are eating really healthy and living a healthy lifestyle. It prevents us from utilizing those things to heal and to balance ourselves back out. So it's really a lose-lose. So how do we actually overcome stress? What is a practical way to overcome stress? I think there's a couple important shifts in perspective, or things that we can learn to see within stressful situations or within our lives that help us to not get stressed out, help us not get sucked into being stressed out. The first one is not to identify with being stressed. So when we are stressed, when we notice that there's stress there, rather than having this mindset of I'm stressed, I am stressed, identifying with that state, we can say things like, there is stress there, or I have stress going on right now. But not identifying with it allows us to take a step back and see that the stress isn't who we are, and not fighting it allows it not to, or prevents it from building. When we fight it, when we look at it and say, I'm stressed, I don't want to be this way, I don't like the way that I feel, and we're looking to escape that feeling, we actually strengthen it. We're strengthening it by fighting it. So learning not to identify can be extremely helpful. Another thing is not labeling things as good or bad, which is a difficult thing for a lot of us to do because we're so used to right away just labeling something that's good, it's convenient, it's easy, it's going to help me, this is bad, it's a challenge, it's an obstacle, I don't like it, I don't want that to happen. And a lot of times when we do this, it's our labeling, it's our seeing what is inherently a neutral situation. Everything that happens in life is inherently neutral until we put a label on it. But by being too quick to label things as good or bad, when we label something bad, we start to get stressed. We think that this shouldn't be happening. I don't want this, so we try to resist and fight it. And the truth in the matter is that a lot of times things that appear not to be good wind up being extremely good for us. It just takes time. So we try to label something that maybe is an event initially, we label that as bad, but really this event is going to continue to expand and have other things that piggyback off of it. And those other things are a lot of times good or may be good. So rather than labeling it as bad right away, if we can learn to allow things to play out, that can be very useful. And it's just another way to take a step back and not get so sucked into what's happening, not get so stressed out about what's happening. The next thing would be to recognize that essentially any time that we're stressing, underlying the stress is fear. We're always afraid of something. On the surface level, we don't really see that. We might think I'm stressing because I'm late handing something in at work or filling something out, or I'm running late for work. But underneath of that is our fear that, well, if I'm late for work, somebody's going to get mad, and maybe if they get mad, they're going to fire me, and if they fire me, then I'm not going to have any income, and I'm going to lose my place where I live and not be able to feed myself or my family. So we have this these deeper layers of fear that underlie what we see as stress on the surface level. And by identifying these things, a lot of times it can help us to let go of the stress by noticing how fearful we are and how we're spinning out underneath all of it this really in-depth scenario where we, essentially at the very root of all of it, we're afraid that we're going to die, or that we're going to die in a less than ideal state, or a state that we don't want to. So recognizing the fear can be very helpful. The next thing is number 4, is there's a quote or a saying that is, stress is caused by being here but wanting to be there. And that's the truth in a lot of ways. A lot of times we get stressed because we're doing something and our thoughts are, I wish I was just on vacation, or I wish it was the weekend, or I wish I was home doing something else. Our minds are not in the present moment. We're not accepting that what we're doing is what we need to be doing. And just by doing that, just by saying the only thing that needs my attention right now is what I'm doing, I don't need to be worrying about how this is going to affect the future, that's not going to help us. And all of these things can be difficult. These 4 things take developing an awareness that in the moment when we start to get stressed, or when we have something that we might perceive as stressful, it takes an awareness to be able to jump in and look at these four things. So number 5, which is really, I think, the most important thing that we can do in our lives to better our lives, is to meditate. And meditation, especially when we do it consistently, it helps us to just create space between our reaction and or I guess our thinking and our reaction. It gives us just enough space, which feels like a lot. When anybody that meditates will relate to that, but to be able to see what's happening and have a step back, or be a step back from it, in order not to get too caught up with all of it. Meditation is also very useful for relieving stress. Just the act of meditation or meditating is very useful for unwinding and letting go of the stress. And I was actually listening to something the other day that was talking about how in the 70s there was a study done on meditators versus non-meditators, and basically what it showed is the people that meditate, a stressful situation or something that happens, they feel it more deeply up front, so they experience it more fully. They're more open to the feelings and what's happening. They're more perceptive and aware of it up front, but then very quickly the stress relieves and they get back to a state of centeredness and calmness. So that's beneficial, because in a scenario where we need to perform or do something, help somebody else, being able to get back to that state of being centered and calm and assertive and aware is what will help us to best serve a role in whatever situation it is. So the other group, the non-meditators, they felt things, or they perceived and experienced the initial stress less upfront, but that grew and it went on for a much longer period of time. So the stress continued, the stress lingered. So it's a really interesting thing, and I mean, I can totally say, like, looking back at my life, I was very stressed and very anxious for most of my life. And a lot of times we don't even realize it, that we just think that's how we are and that there's no other way, but there definitely is. I highly encourage anybody, but especially if you stress or find yourself anxious and struggling to, deal with situations that can be stressful, to try meditating. The other things on this list are physical causes of stress, and these are really important, and these are things that a lot of people don't really understand. And the biggest one is sleep. When we don't get enough sleep, especially when we're chronically underslept, anything that could be stressful out in our day-to-day life is going to be amplified very, very heavily if we're not well rested. But the act of just getting enough sleep, it allows us to think more clearly, allows us to feel better, be more energized. So sleeping consistently and sleeping enough is our greatest really defense against being stressed. It helps us to de-stress and let go of the stress of the day, assuming we're not taking on too much. Nowadays, a lot of people are too stressed to even recover when they sleep. But you take a lot of people not getting enough sleep, not getting 7.5 to 9 hours consistently every day, it just makes for anything happening in life, anything that can be stressful or require us to take action or do anything, makes it a lot more difficult. So sleep is a huge, my biggest thing in terms of getting healthier and improving quality of life is getting enough sleep consistently. The next two would be water and diet, and I'm going to keep these simple. I'm not going to get into too much, but we need really as a baseline half of our body weight in ounces of water per day, or without that, our body gets really stressed. And the same thing goes with diet. When we're putting food or food-like things, junk food and sugar, which aren't really foods, into our bodies, both of these things, not getting enough water and putting unhealthy food into our body, or even unhealthy drinks, sodas, Gatorades, energy drinks, or not Gatorade, but sports drinks, not to use a brand name, these things cause our bodies to get very stressed out. And what happens is it sends a signal mentally that we're stressed and we're anxious. Most of us don't have the ability to understand that the stress is coming from our physiology, And so we're looking for things outside of us for what's going on in terms of making us stressed. That's why a lot of people have free-floating generalized anxiety and stress. And if you can relate to feeling stressed and not being able to identify what is stressful, not necessarily having a stressful situation, that can be why. So eating whole, organic, unprocessed, unpackaged foods as much as possible is really, really important. Avoiding chemicals, definitely cutting out processed sugar, definitely cutting out processed junk foods. That's a huge start and can really help with stress. And drinking enough water. And remember this, like if we have very stressful lives and then we're giving ourselves very stressful, or we're living an unhealthy or stressful lifestyle in terms of sitting all day, that's stressful, eating a poor diet, that's stressful, not drinking enough water, that's stressful. These things all compound. That's why we see so many people getting sick and looking like zombies. You go out nowadays, I go out, and it's just something to notice. Like people just don't look alive. They're there and they're walking around, but they look half dead. And that's not how we're meant to be, and it's no way to live our lives, but we're just so sucked into grinding and accomplishing, achieving, and no emphasis on, being a human being, living fully. The last thing, which is definitely an important aspect of all this, but it's difficult to escape, is Wi-Fi. The frequency of Wi-Fi, our body is electric, and we're taking electromagnetic fields that are very disharmonious to our bodies, and this causes our cells to vibrate at very high rates. From what I understand, that's how it works. I know it's stressful, but that's my understanding of why it's stressful. It essentially puts us into that fight or flight state. So that's what we have to understand. What we need to understand about stress is we have the nervous system, we have fight or flight, which is when we're stressed, that's running and fighting. We shut down our digesting, our detoxing, our healing. But then we have the parasympathetic, which is rest, recover, heal, regenerate, detoxify. If we're spending too much time in this state, or we're spending all of our time in this state, we're breaking down. Things are just going to break down gradually, and that's how we get mentally and physically a big reason why we degenerate and get sick. So we want to be in this relaxed state, and Wi-Fi puts us into this sympathetic state, fight or flight, and it's all over the place. Like we're surrounded by electromagnetic fields that are, hard to escape. The best thing that we can possibly do, and this can be difficult, is to turn Wi-Fi off at night when we sleep, because it can prevent us from getting into a deep sleep, and this is something that I really need to do. It's challenging if you live with other people. And you can also buy certain things. There's brands like Q-Link that make pendants that you can wear that help to absorb some of that energy and take some of it off the body. I typically will wear one of those just as, to help offset some of it. So those are a few things, but it's definitely a challenge, and there's no 100% solution. So that's it. That's my breakdown of stress. I hope that is useful to you. Again, some of these things are perspective shifts, so it takes us challenging what we may be used to and how we may be used to functioning, and creating the space for ourselves, affording ourselves the opportunity to change. So not being hard on ourselves, not demanding that it happen right away, but just seeking to become more aware and create the space for the change, and trusting that it will make our lives better, we'll feel better, we'll be happier, we'll be more content, more at peace, and it's just such a better way to live life. So again, thank you for watching. I hope that's helpful to you. Have a great rest of your day.